What's up? I'm Corlando Scott, an assisted reproduction attorney out of California. And if you're here, you're probably asking the question, is embryo adoption cheaper than IVF? Well, I've got an answer and an explanation for you, and it may not be what you think. Stay tuned. What's up and welcome to this episode. In this episode, I'm going to cover some things around the cost of embryo adoption. We'll look at the cost of embryo adoption versus IVF. We'll look at the cost of IVF and donation. We'll look at why embryo adoption or embryo donation is a cheaper alternative. And I won't let you down. Lastly, I'll talk about some financing options. But stick around to the very end because I have a free treat for you. Let's jump right in. Before I talk about numbers or anything like that, I should probably clarify some things. A lot of people have asked me, is embryo adoption or embryo donation cheaper than IVF? Well, the question has a little bit of a misnomer in it because even when you have adopted embryos, they're still part of the IVF, the in vitro fertilization process that needs to happen. Because after all, you don't get very far just holding some embryos in a petri dish. You have to actually transfer them into either a gestational carrier, a surrogate's uterus, or the hopeful mother's uterus. So we're not getting out of the IVF process altogether, but I know what you mean. You're saying, hey, Corlandos, is it cheaper and easier to have someone donate or for me to adopt an embryo than it is for me to go through the process of egg donation and sperm donation and then creating that embryo on my own? All right, well, let's get to it. The simple answer is yes, it is cheaper to go through an embryo adoption or embryo donation process than to go through the full IVF process from beginning to end. Why is that? Because when you're looking at egg donation and you're looking at sperm donation and you're looking at the creation of embryos using an embryologist, all of that takes time, effort, and money with the help of the professionals that's necessary to do all that. Typically, when you're going through all of that process, you're looking at the program fees associated with the clinic, the embryology and lab fees. You're also looking at the legal fees because you'll need contracts between yourself and the donors, and you're looking at the time involved and also the compensation to the donors. However, on the other hand, when you're looking at embryo donation, there's very few places for you to have to write a check. Mostly, the money for embryo donation goes in you taking ownership of the storage fees. When you receive donated embryos, the one charge that you definitely will take on is the cost to keep the embryos frozen until you're ready to thaw them and use them. In embryo donation, we don't provide compensation to the donors in the same way that we do to an egg donor or even a sperm donor. And you may be asking, well, Corlandos, why would an egg donor receive compensation and an embryo donor wouldn't? Well, they're being compensated for two different things. At the end of the day, it's illegal to sell human tissue. You can't just, sell a kidney on the black market. It's not right. So when we're working with an egg donor, you're not purchasing her genetic material. You're not purchasing her tissue. What you're doing when you're working with a donor is you're compensating her for her time, her effort, the pain, the inconvenience, all the stuff that surrounds her going through the egg donation process. But when we flip that over and we're looking at embryo donors, there's really nothing for an embryo donor to do in the way of inconvenience, time, all that stuff, pain. No, the embryos are already created at that point and they're just, as we say, sitting on ice. They're being cryopreserved. So really, they're just releasing custody to you. So that's why there's a big difference in you're compensating an egg donor or even a sperm donor at times and not an embryo donor. So as you see, the main reason why embryo adoption or embryo donation is a lot cheaper than the full IVF cycle is because the embryo donors have already done a lot of the heavy lifting. The embryo donors have already secured the eggs. The embryo donors have already secured the sperm. The embryo donors have already facilitated and paid for the embryos to be created. And as of now, the embryo donors have already paid for the embryos to be stored or cryopreserved. So the heavy lifting is over, and in walks you, the hopeful embryo recipient. And just so you know, most embryo donations or most embryo adoptions result from individuals or couples who have leftover embryos after they've completed building their family to their heart's content. So they're sitting there in storage and they're asking, hey, we finished growing our family. We don't want any more children. We're not looking to do siblings, and we want to help another couple or another person. That's where the embryo donation process comes from. Also, just so you know, when we're talking about frozen embryos here, a lot of people wonder, well, would I have more success if I did my own fresh IVF cycle and created fresh embryos to transfer into either my uterus or a surrogate's uterus before they're frozen? Because a lot of people wonder, fresh or frozen, which has the better chance for success? Well, I will say this. As of now, the medicine and the science has gotten good enough that we really don't lose that much quality when you're thawing, frozen, or cryopreserved embryos. So I would never shy away from doing a frozen embryo donation just because you're going to be getting embryos that have been cryopreserved. And no, it doesn't necessarily matter how long the embryos have been cryopreserved. So talk to your reproductive endocrinologist to find out more about the likelihood of success with you doing either a frozen versus a fresh embryo transfer. Now, I'm going to talk about some financing options, but before I do me a favor. I want to know if you're considering embryo donation or embryo adoption or IVF in general, let me know which way you're leaning. What are you leaning towards? Doing an embryo donation, doing an embryo adoption, maybe doing a full IVF cycle for yourself? I just want to see where you are. So go ahead, comment below and let me know. Now let's talk about some financing options, because to be honest, guys, every penny counts. And even though embryo adoption or embryo donation is a lot less expensive than a full IVF cycle, it still requires some financial output. And so sometimes we need help getting the finances together. And there are a few options for you. So let's talk about those. If you're going the agency route, there are some agencies that even provide financing options for you. So be sure to keep that in consideration when you're choosing the agency that's right for you. Here are a few notes to jot down when you're considering doing research around how to finance your embryo adoption process. Check to see if your agency or clinic or the bank provides installment payment programs. Also consider crowdfunding. Hey, it's not just for indie filmmakers. You can do it too. There's also nonprofit organizations and other lenders that provide no interest loans for those undergoing certain types of assisted reproduction. There's also fertility grants available. Some health insurers provide benefits for people undergoing IVF treatments and other forms of assisted reproduction. And lastly, look to your employer. There's been some really forward-thinking companies come out lately that provide benefits for their employees in the way of assisted reproduction. This should get you well started on your way to figuring out if embryo adoption or embryo donation is the right thing for you, both financially and for your family building plans. If you enjoyed this video, then you may also be thinking about other forms of assisted reproduction like surrogacy for chance. If you are, I have something for you. It's called the Surrogacy Roadmap, and it's a tool that I designed that walks you through the surrogacy process from beginning to end. So click the link below and get this free resource for you to use to make sure that you're doing surrogacy the right way, and you'll know what comes first, second, third, and last, all the way till you're leaving the hospital with that beautiful bundle of joy. Click below and get your free surrogacy roadmap.